So now you're veteran, well-heeled, and experienced. Look at it that way, Sarah. It's all good.
It's kind of grayish green by me. It looks like tornado weather.
Yeah, I was down in St. Charles, and it was definitely more ominous. Ominous, how do you say that?
Ominous.
Thank you, that word. So it was definitely more ominous than it is up Elk Grove. It's just kind of like partly cloudy, but it was dark when I was in St. Charles, so there was some scary clouds. All right, Tony just put out her PSA about your Jimmy John sandwich, so that's good. So OW, O'Nea's auction. O'Nea's in the house with their office. O'Nea, how many you got seated out there? I know we got a bunch of people that are watching this in groups. I know there's a big group from Berkshire. Oh, there's 5 people at O'Nea's office watching. That's good. So yeah, that's good. Everybody's loading in. You're welcome for lunch. Actually, you'll have to thank Sarah, but we'll get into that shortly. What are we at? 11, 12 o'clock? Good. And Jill, hello. How are you? Good to see you. Lloyd says, thanks for lunch. That's a beautiful thing. Rosanna, they've got 5 agents watching in their office. So that's another 8 agents over and above our count, which is good. Oh, there you go. Gene and Linda are watching. They say hello. Hello, Gene and Linda. So Linda Dressler says hi, Sarah. I'm sure you know her. So good deal. Everybody's got their lunch. All right. We are going to get going. So Donna, hello. I'm not going to get a chance to say hi to everybody in there, but we'll catch up to that. So we'll get rolling right now. This is one Jim Droske and I were talking earlier as we were preparing for this, that this, we believe, is the 5th year in a row we've been talking about credit, which is amazing. And Jim does a great job. Before we get into Jim, we got to start with our sponsor, Sarah Gray. And Sarah's a real estate attorney, although if you look at her bio, she does criminal, she does traffic. So you also do family law too, I think, Sarah?
We don't do family law. The other attorney that works at my office does primarily bankruptcy. So
okay,
the other main area that we cover.
Well, that's probably a good person, or your office is good to know because of that. But Sarah's been in her own practice since 2001, and Sarah has paid for all of your sandwiches. So thank you, Sarah. Sarah, I turn the floor over to you so you can introduce yourself to all the agents present.
Oh, you're very welcome for lunch, and thanks to Richard for putting this whole thing together. It's a really nice opportunity to meet with some agents and let you know a little bit about my firm. I'm in Joliet, but I can certainly travel approximately an hour in any direction for closings as need be. And I have a staff that is extremely well trained as far as being able to handle just about anything that comes along, and dividing up work and making sure that we're able to handle any kind of influx of work. And we would appreciate you giving us a try if you get an opportunity to send over one of your contracts. We will take good care of your clients and make you look good. We are not the type of firm to try and get in the way of a transaction closing. We really understand that if you've got a willing buyer and a willing seller, our goal is to get it to the table. And we want the agents out selling houses. So we try to take a lot of the burdens off of you as much as possible. Obviously, you're the boots on the ground, letting people in and showing the property or being there for inspections and that sort of thing. But I've always regarded going over the home inspection and making those types of requests or deciding what to request as the attorney's function. So I know a lot of real estate attorneys are laying that at your feet nowadays, but we take care of that for you. And we try to have good conversations with our buyers and also the sellers about what's reasonable to ask for. So we're not promising moon and stars, managing expectations and that sort of thing, so that nobody feels like in the end, like they got ripped off or treated unfairly, or they somehow didn't get something that was due them. And as far as calendaring, we've got really strong, well-tested processes in place for keeping track of dates. So you don't have to babysit us, which is something that I know can be frustrating if you are not seeing communication go over in a timely fashion, and you start worrying, are they aware that this date is coming up? I should call and check on it. I think that the agents that work with me routinely know that they don't have to do that kind of thing when it comes to working with my office. So we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a try and allow us to earn your business. So enjoy your time lunching and learning. And thanks again, Richard.
Thanks, Sarah. So Sarah's going to stick around if you guys have some legal questions, as they sometimes pertain to Jim. Speaking of Jim and legal questions, not only does he own Illinois Credit Illinois Credit Services, sorry, you're my credit expert, but anyway, own Illinois Credit Services, but Jim is also a witness in federal court on all things credit. So that's a good segue as we leave the law and start talking about what Jim provides for us. But Jim, his contact information, of course, is in the chat. For you guys, as you have questions, we did get questions submitted ahead of time, so we'll be filtering those questions in to Jim or ask him after the presentation. You guys essentially, Nia, by the way, Sarah, Nia wants to know, do you do short sales?
I do short sales, and I have a short sale negotiator who she's an independent contractor. She works from home, but does a great job. So that takes a lot of burden off the agent to try and negotiate the transaction. If that's what you've been doing in the past, sometimes agents are used to that they're the ones negotiating. So if that's your preference, I'm not going to stand in your way, but we do have the short sale negotiator available.
Yeah, there's still like 900,000 homes nationwide that are underwater. So it still happens. I think I have a client right now we're working with that's, if they're not underwater, they're pretty close in the south suburbs. So all right, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Droske. Jim, the floor is yours. And again, if you guys have questions, hit them in the chat. I'll find opportune times to interrupt Jim as he's presenting. And Jim, it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me out today. We're going to dive into a lot of things, obviously credit related, all the changes that are happening. And this is I do a lot of presentations. This is always one of my favorites to do because there's always a lot of great questions, because there's so much to know, and that credit obviously affects your income in many ways. I mean, that's can be the first stopping point for people, but it's very important to know who you can and should trust when you're referring your people or your clients to any kind of credit repair company. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I have a PowerPoint, but like Rich was saying, I like interactive questions. When you have a question, throw it in the chat. Rich is going to monitor that and then throw out the questions. So let's keep them coming as we go. So let me see if I can handle this technology really quick here.
While you're doing that, Jim, I guess, Tony, go ahead and put out your first question. We're kind of curious about that. I think that's a good starting point too. So you guys got it. We're taking a little poll question.
Oh.
So a little poll question, which was, how confident do you feel advising your clients on improving their credit scores? We're getting a bunch.
Is that for me?
No, you don't have to do it.
Oh,
you can close that out.
Okay.
So hopefully you feel very confident.
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't know if that was a loaded question or not.
No, that's okay. Right now, the majority say that they're somewhat confident, but they would like to get more insights. That's about 73%, Jim.
Okay. Well,
Somewhat
I think you're
confident.
gonna, I think you're gonna learn some things about what you can do, and there's some things at the surface level that you'll be able to tell your clients what to do, but then obviously when it comes to credit, it can be very complicated, and there's additional things that we're going to talk about too as well. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, so we're going to handle a little bit of all that. So first thing, as Rich said, I'm the owner of Illinois Credit Services. Then the first thing, other than Rich asked me to come here, and I've been doing this for many years, there's a lot of people out there talking about credit repair on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and there's a bunch of nonsense out there. So I like to kind of throw out my credentials so you know my background. So I started this company in 2009. I have 34, I think it's actually 35 years of credit related experience in lending. I've owned a mortgage company. I was in auto lending for many years before that. I've been teaching classes at the College of DuPage for 9 years. And as Rich mentioned, I'm also a credit expert witness. I've been hired, I think it's 21 different times to be an expert witness in federal court to explain credit and credit scoring to judges and juries. So they don't have people from TikTok do that, right? You gotta know your stuff when you're in federal court. I also create a class for continuing education for NMLS for the mortgage brokers, all credit related. And then I've been an affiliate with more, and I've done a lot of CNBC stuff, a lot of different things. So the information that you're going to hear today, it's going to be the right answers. So again, start throwing questions out as we go. So the first thing that I just like to always bring up is this ping pong ball of credit scores when you go to all these different sources, right? A car dealer says one score, you get your credit card statement says another. You know, Rich may pull it, it says it's a 561. You go to Experian, it's 627. And by the way, people will go directly to the credit bureaus. They'll go to Experian.com or TransUnion.com thinking that I'm going to get it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. It must be right if it's coming from the credit bureaus. Those scores are no different than the equivalent of what you would get at Credit Karma. And you're going to understand this as we talk about how scoring works and things. But I'll always ask people which one of these scores is the correct score. And the short answer is all of them are a correct score. Everyone is a correct score because a credit score is nothing more than an opinion about the information in your credit report. And no opinion is necessarily wrong. It just depends. The real question is which one matters. And so for the purposes of what you're doing right now, and when you're selling a house and people are applying for a mortgage, it's particularly the mortgage FICO scores that we need to talk about. But when you see all these different scores, again, there's different numbers out there, and it's very confusing to consumers and to most people because they're never really taught how this works. So the first thing that this is the golden egg or whatever, the takeaway, the key takeaway to understand about how credit works is understanding what a score means, because what everybody thinks is that a credit score is a grade of what you've done in the past, and that is not what a credit score is. Credit scores were there before. Many years ago, there was just credit reports. They had no scores on them. And the three credit bureaus hired a company called Fair Isaac Corporation, FICO. And they hired that company to create the first credit scoring models. But they were designed to help lenders make decisions on whether or not they want to lend money. And lenders don't really come straight up so much concerned what somebody did in the past. They're concerned about one thing: if I lend you money, are you going to pay me back? So a credit score is not calculating what you've done in the past, it's predicting what you're going to do in the future. In particular, FICO scores are predicting the chances of a consumer becoming 90 days late or more within the next 24 months from the day the credit report is pulled. It's not identifying if you're late today, it's predicting if you're going to go late in the future. Okay, so we're going to talk about FICO mostly, but there's also another scoring model out there that has gained a lot of traction over the last. It was introduced in 2007 called Vantage Score. Most of the credit scores that you will see or that your customers are going to see, whether it's on Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, all these different websites that they access. Those are called Vantage scores. They are different, and they're not FICO scores. There's different algorithms to them. But Vantage Score is owned and operated by the three credit bureaus. They created this scoring system to compete with FICO. But FICO is used in mortgage lending particularly. Right now, there's some changes that are coming that are really, really important that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But this is what you're looking at right now is called the FICO pie chart, right? And we're not going to dive into all this because what I want to do is give you some nuggets of things that you can tell people about how they can improve their credit. And the biggest thing, I mean, we know delinquencies is relevant, right? If you have a late payment, you have a collection, you have, any kind of derogatory information on a credit report, that's a big deal. But the second biggest deal is this category here called debt ratios. That is 30% of a credit score. And you may have heard that balances on your credit cards in relation to their credit limits affects your scores. The higher you go up near the limit, that's going to lower your credit scores. So I want to talk a little bit about that particular category because it is so relevant. Now, again, this has nothing to do with anyone going late on their credit. In fact, you can drop your credit scores and have nothing derogatory on your credit, because remember, a credit score is predicting if you're going to go late in the future. It's not identifying if you're late right now. So what typically happens before someone starts going late on a credit card? They keep charging and charging and charging, pay a little down, keep charging. And the closer that they get to that credit limit, it's an indication that maybe they have some financial problems. There's a reason they're not paying it off. The credit scores don't know that. In fact, and again, as I put on here, it's debt ratios, not debt to income ratios. Your credit reports have no income information, no income, no assets, not even your job. It doesn't matter. None of those things have anything to do with your credit report or your credit scores. Credit scores can only score what's on the credit report, and income is not part of that. So when we have people that literally make millions of dollars a year and they have credit challenges because the credit scores don't know that they have that income. They don't know what their assets are. So what's really important to understand about this category is that it's a percentage. It's not the dollar amount that the scoring models look at, because the dollar amount of your credit limit is based basically on your income, right? If you have significant income, you might have a $30,000 limit on your credit card. If you have challenged income or less income, you may have a $300 credit limit. Or if you're rebuilding your credit, you have a very low limit. But the credit scores use the percentage of how close you are to the credit limit. So if you owe, let's say if you owe $250 and your credit limit is 300, that's 85% of your credit limit. That is no different than owing $25,000 if your credit limit is 30,000. So a lot of people will look at that and say, $250, what's the big deal? It may not seem like a lot, but if your client is not managing the debt that's reported to the credit bureaus properly, then they could be telling the scoring algorithm that they're maxed out on that credit card, even though it's a very small amount. If you have one of your clients that are rebuilding their credit and starting out with secured cards or low limit cards, tell them not even to carry the card. Put it in their safe, put it in their drawer at home. Don't carry it, because if they carry it, the chances are they're going to use it, and it's very, very easy to have a high balance or charge up $200 or $300 on a low limit credit card. So that's it on that category. Any questions at this point right now? Are we good?
Yeah, let me just check one thing. So yeah, that is a big deal, the percentages, Jim.
Yep.
So, but I'm trying to find out if we had a question on our
While you're looking for that, Rich, let me address this, the optimum percentage, because what most people hear or see, they read on the internet, they hear on the internet, bankers tell people this all the time. They tell people to keep their credit card balances at 30% of their credit limit. I can absolutely tell you that is not the right number to shoot for. Because I think that where that came from is that FICO actually puts it on their blog 30%, but I think it came from that it's actually 30% of your credit score. So they just use the easy number to keep it at 30. But that is not the place that you want to have your clients target. You want to have them target about, it's actually a single digit, 5%, 3 to 5% is the optimum percentage that you want to keep it at. For simplicity purposes, we tell our clients 5 to 10%. That's fine. The point is that if you're at 100% and you're maxed out, if I tell you to get it to 70, that's going to help your scores. If I tell you to get 70 down to 50, that helps more. If you get 50 down to 30, that helps more, but you don't want to stop at 30 and shoot for 30%. You actually want to get it down as low as possible. It's an algorithm. So the optimal percentage is anything greater than 0, but the lowest number. So,
Hey, Jim,
yep.
the next question I have on that. So let's say you pay it down to 0. Now you've got it open, you've got no activity on that card for a year. Are you still getting credit for having no balance?
Yes.
With the high credit limit, even though you've had no activity for 12 months?
Absolutely. Now, you got to be careful if there's too much inactivity, they could close the card. So
Sure.
I have 5 credit cards. I use one. Actually, I think it's 6. I use one. All the rest are in my safe. I pull them out once a year. They have a 0 balance the entire year, and I pull them out around the holidays at Christmas time, and I buy lunch with one, buy, whatever, Starbucks with another. I spend 10 to 20 bucks on each card, pay it off, and put them back in the safe, and they're done. They never close. They are very strong and healthy for your credit. So the point is that you don't have to have a balance on all of your cards all the time. You're still getting the full credit for it. As long as it's open and active, it doesn't mean that it has to have a balance on it.
Yeah, and to that end, I want to share something that I've just seen as a pattern, and Jim can probably speak to this. We'll have a first-time home buyer, let's say, come to us, and they've got some student loans that they're paying. Maybe they've got an old paid car loan and a new car loan, but the credit only has installment debt, no revolving debt. What I've seen is it's very difficult in the mortgage credit world to get a score north of 700 without any sort of revolving debt. So there
Yeah.
needs to, and again, just historically, what I've seen. Jim, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. And it's not just the mortgage industry, that's credit scores in general. Because what the algorithms of the scoring model, remember, they're trying to figure you out. They don't know anything about income. They don't know any of that. They just know what they see. So they're looking for clues on that credit report. And they look for different kinds of types of debts that you have. Installment loans are car loans, student loans, things like that. There's credit card activity, and there's mortgage payments. So a $500 credit limit credit card has more of an impact on your credit scores than a $50,000 car loan. Because remember, when you have an installment loan, you only have 1 or 2 choices for the most part. You either pay it or you don't, right? You don't get bonus points for making extra payments or paying it off early. They're looking for your habits. You were told to pay $450 a month. Are you paying it every single month? That's a good habit that they're looking for. But think about all the habits and all the choices that you can make when you're talking about a credit card. You can charge it all the way up and then pay it all the way down. You can charge a little, pay a little. You can never use it at all, put it in your drawer. There's a lot more clues that the scoring algorithms can obtain by your credit card activity. So to your point in question, Rich, absolutely. If your client does not have a credit card at all, whether they don't like them or not, they don't have to like them, but they have to have them to have good credit, because if they don't, they're not giving the scoring algorithm enough positive clues on how they can manage their finances.
Jim, I got 2 questions. So
Sure.
Marie in the chat asks, will it affect my credit if I close the credit card? I know the answer to that, but I'll let you answer.
Okay. The answer is, well, it depends.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You didn't hit us with it depends. Come on.
Yeah, it depends. Well, here, I also tell everyone, don't ever close a credit card. The only time you ever want to close a credit card is if you're starting with a secured card where you gave them 300 bucks and eventually you want that money back. Once you've used it as a proper stepping stone to get the good credit cards that you want, you want to close a card like that just to get the security deposit back. Other than that, never close a credit card. My oldest credit card is a card that I've had open since my freshman year of college in 1983. I've just never, and that wasn't by plan. That just, you don't want to close your credit cards. The reason why it depends is because a quick example, if you have two cards and they both have $1,000 limit, and let's say one is a zero balance, so that's a 0%, and the other one's maxed out at $1,000 at 100%, they're going to add up all your credit card limits and all your balances together. So that would be a calculation of $1,000 balance divided by $2,000 in credit limits. So you're at 50%. If you close the card that has the zero balance, they're automatically, without you charging another thing, without paying anything, you have now changed your aggregate utilization from 50% to 100% because you closed out that card that had no balance on it with $1,000 limit. Now, the reason I say it depends, if you have 5 or 6 credit cards that all have healthy limits, and you have, you know, $20,000, $30,000 in credit limits and with no balances, and you close out one of those cards with that has a $5,000 limit on it, it's probably not going to impact your scores at all.
That makes
But
sense.
in general, you just shouldn't close them. But the technical answer is it does depend.
So I'm gonna tackle this question for Marie, and then we've got 2 more after that. So, which is
Sure.
great. Marie said, "Hey, what if they closed it for lack of use?" And I think that goes back to what you were talking about, pulling the cards out of the safe and then using them
Yep.
once a year so that you can avoid that. Unfortunately, if they close that card on you, I don't believe there's much you can do, and then the impacts are going to be the impacts. Whether it's what Jim gave as an example, 25,000 in limits, you lost one card for inactivity, probably not a big deal. Or maybe it was dramatically impactful because it made it look like you now are maxed out on the rest of your credit. So that
Right.
part. But if they closed it on you for inactivity, just remember, keep these cards somewhat active. Anthony asks, what if the card is charging an annual fee and a new card is offering the same benefits, we'll say rate or whatever, but with no annual fee? So
Yeah,
can you,
I mean, that all kind of falls under the same, you know, financial decision of yeah, you'd rather not pay an annual fee if you don't have to, but you want to do it when you are going to make a calculated decision of closing a credit card. You just want to take in the consideration of what's the credit limit, how is it going to impact your overall percentages, you know, and so yeah, you should probably look to close it if it has an annual fee based on the benefits or in cost versus benefits. But you want to also look at how it could potentially impact your credit scores.
okay. I'm gonna read one from our pre-submitted ones, and then we got another one from Patty. But Denise asks, how long does it take for a purchase or a payment to impact my credit score? So in the example, I think what she's saying, okay, Jim just advised me to pay my credit cards down. That'll help my scores. They throw a big payment in. When does their score update?
Yep. Yeah, I love this question because this is one of those things that has so much misinformation about it. Because a lot of people think that everything updates on the 1st of the month or the 15th of the month or whatever. There's literally billions of credit cards out there, and they're all getting updated at different times of the month, depending on what your closing date is, your closing statement date. That's when it gets updated to the credit bureaus. So you can have a whole bunch of activity. You can make your payments, and when they're going to do is when they close out your, now I'm not talking about the due date, I'm talking about the statement closing date. When they stop the month's billing and they on July 11th and they say, here's your balance, it's 2,867. When they send you that bill, that's also the day that they send the information to the credit bureaus and say, and so if you ever look at your credit report, it will match whatever your statement closing balance was on that date. So if you want to kind of control what the credit bureaus see, pay down the balance before your statement closing date. And then they'll get the balance as it's updated. Now it has to clear. They usually only send the information to the credit bureaus on payments that have cleared. But if you know you're going to have a high balance, and again, they're all going to update organically over time anyway. But if you're in the mortgage process and you know you charged something up recently, and you don't want it to change, lower your credit scores, or you're just looking for a score increase, get it paid down before the statement closing date. And that's when that goes for purchases too. Whatever is purchased by the closing statement date, that's what's going to get sent to the credit bureaus.
Okay, Jim, I'm gonna, Patty asks, and I'm gonna tackle this, but I'm gonna let you shed some light on this too. But Patty asks, what if there is a late fee, but it gets waived in the following month? Does it still count as a late fee? So I want to qualify something. You being charged a late fee does not necessarily show up on the credit report. The credit report is only going to show if you're over 30 days late. Now, if you're 15 days late, you've made it on the 16th, the card says, hey, you're 15 days late, we're going to hit you with 5% or 20 bucks or whatever it is. That's fine, you're going to pay it. That aspect, to the best of my knowledge, that late fee does not show up on your credit report. However, if you over 30 days late, that'll impact the report, again, kind of regardless of fee. How did I do it, Jim?
No, that's spot on. That's exactly right. The late fees aren't going to show. And for credit reporting purposes, you are only considered late until you're 30 days late. So you have a pretty big window to be. In fact, you can be late on every one of your bills and have perfect credit. Because now people shouldn't do that, but it's only your relationship with the creditor that sees that, but it's not reported as 30 days late for credit reporting purposes and doesn't impact your scores until like you said, 30 days late.
All right, let's see. Joanna asks, and this is a great question too, because I think this has happened to a lot of us. How does it impact your score if your credit card company offers to upgrade you to a different card with the same company? She gets these offers all the time from her current credit cards.
Are you saying if you open up a new card? Is that what we're asking?
I think they're saying like, hey, you've got this happens because I have a lot of different weird United accounts. So you got an account and they're like, hey, we love you. We love your activity. We want to upgrade you from silver to gold. We think you'll get more benefits. So
yeah, yeah, well, what that comes down to is it depends on if they're actually opening up a different account that gets where they close one on your credit report and they open up a new account. Sometimes, and again, this is a lender by lender determination. Are they actually just moving you to a different program within the same account, or are they actually, closing out one account and opening up another? It's hard. You should ask them that. But again, it's one of those things that as long as you have the information to make, like, if it's a much better program, I'm not saying, hey, don't ever do that. You should, if it makes sense to do, just take into consideration how closing an account and opening up another account, it could affect things. Now, if it's the same limit and they're just closing one account and opening another with the same limit, the only impact that it's going to have is your length of history of your accounts. And that's a small impact anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. That's one of those things that if things are really healthy on your credit report, you're not going to make a decision that's necessarily going to be wrong. It's when somebody has some questionable things or some things that they're not a very healthy credit report that you want to be careful about opening and closing different kinds of accounts.
Jim, Irene asks, how many credit cards should I have for, I believe what she's saying is a good credit score, but it typed out as good credit card. How many credit cards should I have to have good credit?
Okay, well, if you don't have any now, you want to start building that up. And I would say you absolutely have to get one. If you're in the mortgage process, I wouldn't open up much more than that, because when you start opening too many accounts, you start losing points for a category called too many accounts too soon, basically. And that can start, because what happens is the scoring models, again, they're trying to figure you out. And if you have all this activity, all these new credit cards opening up, they start scaling back your score, saying, what's going on here? We don't know. What are you doing with 3 new credit cards? And so you want to consume them and open them up slowly over time. I tell people that to try to maximize your points, you want to have probably 3 to 4, maybe 5 credit cards. There's articles with CNBC where my scores have been a perfect 850 and I have 5 open credit cards. I think it actually might be 6. But what you want to avoid is the store credit cards. Don't go crazy with the store credit cards. You don't need to have 12 credit cards. You don't. And the reason why you don't really want the store cards is you don't need the 15% discount at the checkout line for that's just an incentive so they can get you to open up a card. And if you want to do it and it's, that's fine. But if you get a Kohl's card, you probably need a Target card. If you get a Target card, you need a Macy's card, and and on and on. And those tend to have lower credit limits. Like you usually don't see a Kohl's card with a $15,000 limit. I suppose it could happen, but those tend to be lower because it's limited to spending at that particular store, and they tend to have higher interest rates associated with it as well. So I like to, and I think it's healthiest to just stick with the Visas, MasterCards, American Express, Discover, things like that, the major cards.
Okay. Let's see here. We do have a question that's not credit card related, but credit score. So
Okay.
Dorina asks, and I think I'm going to tackle this one. Does mortgage payments affect the credit score if they're paid bi-monthly? My answer is no, not at all. So no, if they pay bi-monthly, if you pay, so you've got a every 2-week payment situation, so you can accelerate the payoff. That's not going to impact your score one way or another. Fact of the matter is the bureaus are probably not even going to recognize or even
they don't. Right. And to add on to that, there's a lot of these TikTok hacks of pay 2 payments a month on your credit cards and it increases your score. It's total nonsense. They update it. They update it once per month. And there are some cards that'll update it more often than once a month, but it doesn't affect your scores in any way, shape, or form any differently. It's a snapshot of a moment in time. Whatever they pull the credit report, whatever's on there, you don't get bonus points for making more than 1 payment in a month.
Yeah. So I missed Tony. Tony did say on some of those department store cards, she does get 5% back. So be
well,
careful.
Again, that's weighing the financial benefit to, how it may impact your scores.
I got it. All right. So Jennifer asked, how do student loans over $100,000 in forbearance affect your credit score?
Okay, well, first off, the dollar amount of those loans don't matter. Well, they do matter to the person who owes the money.
Sure.
And they certainly make a difference in how it could impact the debt ratios for the mortgage process. But when we're talking about credit scores themselves, it can be a $2,000 loan or a $100,000 loan or $500,000 loan. The dollar amount when it comes to credit reporting isn't significant. And if it's in deferment or any of those, as long as it's not reported delinquent in any way, it's not affecting the scores adversely, except under one condition. And this is one that does happen when loans are in deferment and they're accruing interest. If the loan balance starts exceeding the original loan amount excessively, and there's percentages, but usually you start seeing where if your loan amount exceeds about 120% of the original loan balance, that can start dropping your credit scores. It doesn't happen a lot, but it can. But other than that, the dollar amount, 100 grand versus 2,000, whatever, that part doesn't affect the scores differently.
That's great. Actually, that's something I learned something new today too. So that's fantastic, Jim. I appreciate that. Nia, I'm going to get to your correct question in a second. I want to jump to Donna's for a second so we can get off credit card for a minute. How does medical debt affect credit scores? I know that's probably got a long run for you, Jim.
We're about to get into all that, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you know what? Before we do, let me knock off Nia's question.
Sure.
How does it work with secured credit cards? My understanding of it, and I'll let Jim add any color to this. Usually, when I talk to a client who is needing credit and their credit score is such that they're just not going to be able to grab any random Visa application and send it in, like their credit's rough, then I tell them to go to their bank. Most banks do offer some version of a secured credit card. And with this secured credit card, you're going to deposit $250, $300. They're going to give you a credit limit of $250 or $300 to match the cash they have on hand. and then you need to use that account, pay it off, use that account, pay it off. Now, outside of banks, Jim's got some other places he could recommend. And then if I've missed anything there, Jim, let me know. Feel definitely let everybody know.
No, that's exactly right. Because when it says the word secured on your credit report, that is not a derogatory component of a credit report or a credit score. It's a credit card like anything else. It's how the creditor who's issuing the card is managing their risk. So if somebody is a little too risky to give an unsecured credit card, then they may require a deposit. But as far as credit scoring purposes goes, secured or unsecured has no bearing on the scores themselves.
Excellent. I'm going to let you get back into the presentation, and then we'll go
Sure.
back to the chat, since it sounds like the presentation is going to answer our medical debt question.
We're going to get into some changes that have been happening, and part of those are medical debts for sure. So
Cool.
First thing, and this has been going on for a little while now, but a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with this. Tax liens and all judgments, all of them for everybody, have been removed from credit reports. Now, it doesn't. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Wait, I know some agents are well aware of that this happened. Do you want to know why, Jim?
Why is that?
Because Jim is correct, and I want Jim to give you guys a date when this happened. Tax liens and judgments came off for credit reports. For us as lenders, that's a little problematic, because that's where we find out if there's tax liens or judgments. The next time we can potentially find out about tax liens against the buyer is title, because title is going to do a search on the buyer, and when they do a search, they may find liens. And unfortunately, some of our sellers' title companies don't give us enough proper notification. Some of them actually, and you guys in agents respond accordingly. You've been to a closing where the seller's title company says, oh, by the way, do you have this tax lien from the state of Illinois from 2019 paid? And that's the first time you find out. We didn't know as the lender, because, again, it's not part of the credit. So this has actually come up, and it's very problematic. To that end, Jim, I'll let you go ahead and
Yeah, so this happened in 2017, so it's been around for a while. And so a mortgage report, residential mortgage credit report, RMCR, they actually, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them will pull information also from LexisNexis, because in the mortgage process, it doesn't mean that these things don't exist. It means that when your clients go to Credit Karma, or they go to any credit report, whether it's annualcreditreport.com or any of them, they're not going to see it. And sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind, and everybody just goes through the process assuming that they don't exist until you get to the application process, the credit reports, the title searches. And so it's a big deal. Now, it is a win for the consumer because it doesn't affect the scores at all. It's something that has to be addressed in the mortgage process, but it's not on the credit reports. So let's talk about medical collections. So there's been a lot going on, a lot in the news that we're going to talk about too, about these right now at this moment regarding medical collections. And this is nationally, right? No medical debt can be reported for 365 days. It used to be where 30 days walking out of the doctor, they could send it to a collection agency. It's on your credit report before you even submit it, before it got submitted to insurance. So what this time period, this 1 year time period, gave a lot of time to work it out with the insurance companies before it doesn't mean it can't be turned over to a collection agency. It means that the collection agency cannot report it to the credit bureaus for 1 year. Now, this was a big one that happened a couple of years ago. All paid medical collections have been deleted from all credit reports everywhere. In fact, it's actually not just deleted. Any medical collection under $500 is no longer reported to any credit report. Now, and that's a win for consumers for sure, right? It's not on the credit reports. The big ones, anything over $500 is still on credit reports, but you may have seen this in the news. This happened here. It was supposed to be effective a couple days ago. The CFPB announced a rule that they was going to be implemented to, and it was all over national news and everywhere you looked, and everybody got a lot of traction. Everybody said all medical collections are deleted off of all credit reports per the CFPB. Well, that did not go into effect because, first of all, two things happened. The credit bureaus sued the CFPB because they said, hey, you are not a rule making, you're an enforcement agency, not a rule making agency. You can't decide what goes on credit reports and not. And again, the three credit bureaus, they're very, very powerful. And so they sued them over that. But even more so, what really happened is when Trump dismantled the CFPB, that rule kind of went away. So all the things that everyone heard about all medical collections being removed from credit reports effective a couple days ago, that did not happen. However, there's 4 states listed there. Can anybody tell me what those 4 states have in common?
I don't know.
Those 4 states are the only states in the country that medical collections are now illegal to put on credit reports. So
Nice.
when I just said that no medical collections are on credit reports, that's the CFPB's national rollout for everyone in the country. However, Colorado, New York, and Connecticut and Illinois, Pritzker signed a bill, I think it was in June of last year, that went into effect January 1st, 2025. And nobody's talking about this, right? Everybody's talking about the CFPB thing. But the fact is, for all of your clients in Illinois, any resident of Illinois, there are no medical collections, no matter the dollar amount, reported to any of the 3 credit bureaus.
Well, that's great news because I think we just handled Donna's and Jill's question. So it's perfect.
Yeah, right. I mean,
well done.
and that's a big, big deal, a big win. I think there could be some problems in the whole healthcare system for that, because if people don't pay their medical collections, that could affect premiums and everything else. But that's a whole different story. But as far as credit scores go, and people trying to buy houses and get mortgages, this is definitely a win for them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Okay.
You want questions or new? Oh yeah, we should talk about this and then we'll get back into questions.
Okay. So new mortgage scores. So let me kind of bring you back to what when they have credit scores, and we're going to talk about FICO in particular. Think of FICO scores like phases of iPhones, let's say, where you have a flip phone, then you have iPhone 4, iPhone 5, 7, 8, 10, 15, whatever we're on. Every few years, they come out with a new phone. Well, they do that pretty often with phones, but the same thing happens with credit scores. They come up with a new algorithm, and then every few years, they update the algorithm to keep up with the current times and new developments in the economy. And right now, to this day, since 1999, the mortgage industry, not by anybody's choice, it's by law, they are still using the mortgage scores that were created in 1999, 26 years ago. Part of that reason is when Bill Clinton signed the deregulation of the mortgage industry and created mortgage-backed securities, they decided they have to have a uniform scoring system for all mortgages to be scored on, and they created the FICO 2, FICO 5, FICO 4, and FICO 5. Those are the 3 mortgage scores, and they're basically, with all the changes that have happened with medical billing and short sales and all these things that have happened over the last 20, 25 years, the mortgage industry is still using essentially flip phones of credit scores. They're the oldest models. So there was a bill that was passed in 2018. New mortgage scores are coming. They're getting rid of the ones from 1999. It was supposed to be rolled out the first quarter of 2024. Now it's supposed to be the fourth quarter of 2025. They're pushing it back to 2026 now, but it is coming. They're trying to figure out how to price the secondary market when it comes to the mortgage scores, because they're going to have all these new models out, and they have all these mortgages for years and years based on old models, and they're trying to figure out how to price that. But we need to talk about what's going to happen, because it is going to be a significant change for the mortgage industry. So they're going to move to what's called FICO 10T and Vantage Score 4.0. This is the first time that the credit bureaus are going to be involved in the mortgage process. There's going to be two different scoring models. These are two different algorithms completely. And there's some differences here that we'll touch on a little bit.
Hey, Jim, I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
These two when are these two scores when are these two coming in? Do we know?
Well, they exist now. They're used in certain lending environments, but for mortgages, they're pushing it back to probably the beginning of 2026 because
Okay.
they're just trying to figure out the secondary market right now and how they're gonna bundle them, and also how they're gonna implement these changes into Fannie and Freddie, the desktop systems and things like that.
Well, in considering they might take Fannie and Freddie out of conservatorship, I think there's a lot more to it than that. So let's
There's
do
a
this.
lot going on.
I want to put this on the shelf because of that. I just
Yeah,
went
yeah.
through we're getting close to the end. We got 10 minutes left
Oh
and we
boy.
got some
Okay.
great questions. So I want to see if we can kind of rapid fire through. I've got, it looks like I got like 7 questions. So we're going to rapid fire you through some of these. And I think they're
Shoot.
great. So those of you that have stuck around are going to get a lot of benefit in the last 10 minutes, as you
Okay.
always do from what we do out here. So Nia had a great question. Give us some credit tips that she can share with her clients that are buying right now.
Well, if they're buying right now, there's not a standard answer because I'm not going to tell them to get a credit card or pay. It depends on what's on their credit reports right now. What I would say, if they haven't been pre-approved by you already and they don't have a mortgage pre-approval, and if they have any credit issues, my first answer would be let me talk to them or review their credit, because what you don't want to do is it is my job is to help you close more sales, right? And so I will look at the credit report. If there's a simple answer and it just, I'll tell you the right advice, or I'll tell them what they should do. If it should be get a credit card, pay something down. You got to be very careful about paying off collections. If you start telling them to do that, that can actually drop a credit score. So it's not a real standard answer. Of course, if they don't have a credit card, yes, tell them to get a credit card. If they have maxed out balances or high balances, tell them to get it down to 5 to 10% of their credit limit. None of those things are necessarily going to be harmful. But here, if they have 2 or 3 credit cards, don't tell them to go get another one. So, and if you're concerned about the scores or they're not pre-approved, get them to Rich, get them to me. Let's put professional eyes on there so we can help get them ready so that you can sell them a house.
Yeah, and honestly, Nia, I think the biggest tip is really get them to your lender so that they can get eyes on a real credit report and give advice accordingly based on the situation. Now, you mentioned one thing, and it is on my list, a submitted question. Marie said, "Is it true a client should not close an account that has negative credit?" So I'm paraphrasing because we answered part of her question. So if you've got that open collection, you mentioned, hey, don't pay it off. Potentially, that's a thing not to pay it off. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It all depends on how it's impacting the scores, really. And that comes down to the age of how old it is. But if something's negative, if you have like late payments or something, I mean, you can't close a collection. You can only pay a collection. You can close credit cards, you can close other types of accounts, but the answer is still the same. You never want to close an account. That's not going to help whether it has negative reporting history or not. If it has negative history, chances are the creditor is going to close it on you. You don't have that control. But in general, you don't want to close an account, and you want to be very, very careful about advising anyone to pay off a collection, because that can have an adverse effect on the scores too.
Can an equity line of credit affect your credit score? So we're talking
Sure.
about a home equity line. I mean, a home equity line of credit, I believe, is what they're talking about.
Yeah, it can affect your scores, but I think maybe what they're asking about is that calculated like a credit card? Is that maxed out? Like if you because it's a revolving account. But the answer is if it's coded right with the credit bureaus and it's scored correctly, they know that it's a mortgage and it's not treated. It's a revolving account, but it's not treated as a credit card account, so it's not in those calculations.
So if somebody's got a $25,000 line that they use to reno their kitchen and they owe $25,000, as long as it's coded correctly, it won't have an impact.
That's correct.
Good deal. All right. Dorena asks, so we know medical collections now in the state of Illinois are not reported on credit reports. Again, another thing that many of us learned. What about other collections? Is there a limitation to any other collections being reported in the bureaus right now? Dorena
Nope.
asks.
It's medical only because there's been a big push to to believe that medical collections are like, nobody asks for a medical collection, right? They don't ask for medical procedures. So there's a lot of schools of thought that that's not an indicator of responsibility or responsible financial habits. So that's why they're pushing to exclude those from credit reports. But collections, you got a Verizon collection, you got a collection from a credit card, it gets turned, anything like that. Those are business as usual. Those are going to be on the credit reports.
Got it. Joanna says, how does it affect your score to settle a collection for less than the balance due? Yeah, first you're settling for less than it's due. What does that look like on your credit?
Yeah, I tell people to do that if they, some lenders don't like that, but basically most people just don't want to see an unpaid balance. So if you can settle it, go for it. It's not, people get concerned by when it says settle for less than full balance, that's a negative terminology. And it's a negative narrative on the credit reports. But here's the thing, it's already negative. It's already a collection. It's already a charge off. It already has a negative component to it. All you're doing is swapping out one negative component for another. And so you're not going to have a worse impact on the credit scores. In fact, generally speaking, you're going to have a positive impact because you're not going to have a past due balance. You're not going to have, the balance will be zero, whether it says settled or not.
All right. Barbara asks a question that was actually submitted as well. So Barbara and Betty are asking this question. Betty submitted it earlier. How exactly is your credit affected by bankruptcy? And does it differ between a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13? Does it even make a difference?
No, I mean, well, bankruptcy is a bankruptcy. It has a serious impact on the credit scores. But again, the answer is it depends. There's times when filing a bankruptcy can actually improve a credit score. But that's also when if you're past due on a bunch of debts and you have over the limit credit cards and you're going late on everything, your scores are going to be very, very low, probably in the high fours, very low 500s. Filing a bankruptcy eliminates that aspect of the debt. It doesn't mean that the credit is good necessarily, and there certainly is an adverse impact to the scores when it comes to bankruptcy, but like if you're at 550, you're not going to 450 by filing a bankruptcy. It's what you want to look at is the recovery time and starting to work with us because no matter credit repair and credit is not about debt. You have to separate the debts that are owed and the credit reporting and the derogatory component of it. And as soon as somebody files a bankruptcy, that's when we should start working with them so that we can get them ready so that they can apply for their mortgage as soon as possible. There are some waiting times after you file bankruptcy that Rich maybe can talk to about how long you have to wait before you apply. And that's the time that you want to start working on the credit reports where we help people.
Yeah, and I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the bankruptcy piece. What many people don't know, and what lenders maybe have even misinformed people, it is possible to get a mortgage while you're in a Chapter 13.
Mm-hmm.
I will repeat that. It is possible to get a mortgage to buy a house while you're in a Chapter 13. Our guidelines for that are as follows. Number one, they have to be in the repayment process for at least 12 months and have paid those 12 months on time. The last part of it is ultimately you do need the judge's approval. And if the judge approves it, and I have not had one denied yet, if the judge approves it, we can make a loan to that person that's in a Chapter 13 or even a day out of it. Doesn't really matter.
And part of that too, though, is they need to have the scores high enough to qualify.
Yeah.
So we have worked with people, and it's very difficult. It's on a case by case basis. We have worked with people in the 13 to try to get their scores to the point where you can apply for the loan through Rich. And so that has worked at times. But again, that's a case by case situation.
Yeah, Jim, what I want to cover now is there was a question that was asked on here. Oh, hi,
Rich,
sir. Go ahead.
can I just interject something?
Yeah.
I will tell from personal experience, because we do bankruptcy, if you're just, if you have someone that's going along carrying a very high debt load for years and they're making payments on it, but it's not really getting anywhere, and they see some trouble coming down the road where they're going to end up defaulting, it would be much better for them to file a bankruptcy before they default than to wait until their credit's already trashed. Because going back to your pie chart, what you're doing by filing the bankruptcy is just getting rid of all of your debt load. And if you've done it before there's been derogatory reporting for 30, 60, 90-day lates, then it ultimately is a really clean credit report post bankruptcy. And you're, even without doing a ton of credit repair, your score is probably going to go up fairly quickly. So that's a different type of bankruptcy than what Rich was mentioning in chapter 13. I'm more or less talking about chapter 7, but it could translate also to a chapter 13. If you can file the bankruptcy, everybody stops reporting at that point. So even though you're not making payments directly to the creditors, or maybe they're not getting paid in full, the negative stuff that gets reported before the bankruptcy doesn't necessarily come off. So you want to file, if possible, before that negative stuff comes on.
I want to kind of close with this. Terry had, and Sarah, thank you very much. That's awesome. Terry had a question, which was, Jim, how does your program work and how does your fees work?
So can you guys still see my screen?
I actually, we were kind of, I actually killed it. If you want to do another share, if you want to do another share and get to that slide, be my guest.
There's no advance fees. It's illegal to charge advance fees for any credit repair. And so I'm just clicking through here. So we charge $139 after 14 days, $99 month to month. That's the only legal way to charge after services are done. And there's a lot of companies out there that they have 6-month programs or 12-month programs. I mean, if somebody's only needs 1 or 2 months, they only pay for 1 or 2 months. It's just it's a case-by-case situation. Our job is to get them back to you so you can sell them a house as quickly as possible. We also, one thing that's very different is we email every dispute letter to every client. I'm the only company in the country that I know that does this. All the other company owners jump on me that they say that I'm sharing all the secrets, but these aren't secrets, they're strategies. And people are paying for that strategy. And I think there needs to be a transparency about the industry. And that's why we're very, very transparent about the whole process. So we email all the letters. We don't charge upfront fees. We're licensed and bonded in Illinois, and somebody asked earlier, just really quick, they asked about how to tell if somebody's reputable or if there's accreditation. Anyone that you're working with, which hopefully it would be us for credit repair, but if you have anyone that you are talking to about helping with credit, whether it's somebody you saw on Facebook or any on the internet, ask them for their state of Illinois registration. It is required by law that they show that to you. And if they ask you what is that, or they don't show it to you, they are not operating legally in Illinois. Plus, they're also required to show you their $100,000 surety bond. We have those readily available all the time, but that's a good way to tell if somebody's, at least, it doesn't mean they're doing everything right, but at least they're starting out the right way.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we didn't get to everybody's questions, Jim. I think next time we'll just do Q&A. So it was really, really good.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do about getting some of those individual questions answered. Maybe Jim, you and I could work together on those. So
yeah, I'd be more than happy to send out emails or answer some stuff for people.
Yeah. Jim's a great resource, guys. If you have just a basic question, pick up the phone and call him. He's always a phone call away. Sarah, I wanted to thank you again, and obviously it's a decent resource if you do have a client that's going to file bankruptcy. I needed somebody to refer that to as well. Upcoming events for us. I wanted to share with you guys really quickly. We have on Tuesday, March 25th, we are going to be in the South Side for a little after hours. I think we've got only 2 spots left, maybe a little more, but we are going to be at Hawaii Fluid Art in Tinley Park, actually. So if you happen to be around, reach out to us. We'd love to see you at the event. We'll get you the event information. Our next 2 classes, we have one class that's geared to consumers, but you guys are all welcome. It is a Zoom personal budget class. I teach budgeting to my clients after they get into their house so that they have a better idea of what's coming in, what's going out, and the most important thing, how much they're saving. It's a great class. We go over it. I've been using this technique for 8 years. It is a game changer. Come check that out. Last but not least, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be April 23rd. Now, this is called Smart Money Moves. Honestly, what I wanted to share with you guys, I may rename it. This is really a class for you if you want to work with investors or if you yourself are an investor. We will have experts speaking on 1031 exchanges and cost segregation. These are 2 unbelievable tools for investors. If you want to be more knowledgeable in the investment arena so you can talk to investors with some credibility and have some good people to learn from, if you yourself want to learn more about 1031 exchanges and or cost segregation, how that could save you a lot of money on your investment property, that's going to be our Lunch and Learn April 23rd. And don't forget, if you're looking for a mortgage, that's what we do here at Cross Country in the Kimball Team. Give us a ring, 847-603-2300, purchase, refinance, all 50 states, all sorts of down payment programs for people in bankruptcy or just got out of bankruptcy. So that being said, thank you guys. And always never forget to try to say this. Tony, none of this happens without you. So thank you very, very much. And Sarah, thanks for sponsoring. Jim, thanks for being an incredible resource for us. We really appreciate it. Thank all you guys for checking in with us. Hopefully you got a lot out of it, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.